What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Recently we started getting some very unambiguous messages from Putin that his playbook might be getting a scary remix. Fresh intelligence reviewed by the US and Western agencies hints that Vladimir Putin's grand ambitions, which are, as you know, to roll over all Ukraine and redraw Europe's map, blah blah blah, well, actually they might be switching to more immediate, manageable goals, which are fortifying the ground his troops already occupy and patching up some Russia's creaking economy. Which in a weird way kinda makes sense, right? I mean, Putin is not a young man anymore, and this stalemate goes absolutely nowhere. The president in the US is as favorable towards Russia as it gets. Plus, it is the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Second World War, Putin's literally favorite holiday. All stars aligned for Putin to finally do something what he will be remembered for. After all, we think that this was the master plan behind the invasion. Not the seizure of Ukrainian lands, not the confrontation of NATO, but imperial ambitions of Putin instead. He wanted to put his own name next to other great Russians, such as Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and maybe even Rurik himself. Sounds like a downshift for a man who once bragged about overwhelming momentum and taking Kiev in 3 days, right? But back when Kremlin elite bragged that Ukraine's defenses were crumbling like a cheap plywood, the talk was all about going for the grand prize. Seize Kiev, wrap up this by Christmas, maybe even plant a Russian flag somewhere in Lviv for good fortune, right? But as casualty reports mounted and Ukrainian forces stiffened, that blueprint started looking shakier than a house of cards in a hurricane. Now, whispers in the corridors of Western intelligence suggest that Putin is recalibrating. The Kremlin is by all means not happy with this new attitude either. He forces them to support the invasion at first against their will, well, obviously there will be more people to share the blame with in case some things go wrong. Then he forced them to look stupid when the blitzkrieg failed. He asked them several times to keep convincing the people that everything goes according to the plan, and just when Russian propaganda was barely able to clean Putin's mess of him offering temporarily ceasefire and then being countered by Ukrainians, Putin is once again doing a 180 turn and makes the decision no one in Kremlin saw coming. For how long will they tolerate Putin's instability and blame shifting? He is the one making stupid decisions, but they are the ones paying the price and being humiliated. Instead of dreaming of conquering every inch of Ukrainian soil, he might be thinking, how do I keep what I already got and save face back home? This unexpected pivot has emboldened even Donald Trump and his negotiating team to float the ideas that maybe, just maybe, Putin's got an appetite for peace after all. They see this tactical retreat as a golden opening for a deal so sweet, like territories, economic cash infusions, you name it, that he will not be able to simply resist it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because senior US officials are still giving Putin the unconvinced side eye, thinking that even if he signs on the dotted line, he will treat the ceasefire like a speed bump, and once he's over it, he will then floor the pedal of invasion once again at full speed, just once the cameras are off. So today, let's see what this shift really means, who is pulling the strings, and why this pause might just be the calm before the even fiercer storm. Remember when ridiculous Russian propaganda was serving us daily news about the unstoppable advance into Ukraine? When was the last time we even heard that? Everything goes according to the plan, by the way. So yeah, those boastful narratives will be in Kiev by next week, have melted faster than snow in Sochi. Behind the scenes, the Kremlin's generals have been crunching numbers and staring at casualty figures that read like a horror novel. The old playbook of all-out conquest was bleeding manpower and morale. So, what is now left for a shrinking empire to do then? According to the senior Western intelligence officials, Putin may have quietly shifted gears from dreaming of a full sweep across Ukraine to something more affordable, let's call it like this. Solidify the current holdings you already grabbed and then clean up your mess back at home. It is the difference between trying to conquer the world and just trying to keep the sofa you already own by outbidding an old lady in a yard sale. This does not mean that the Russian president has thrown in the towel. No, not yet, at least. He is simply acknowledging that for now, pushing more to the east or to the north could stretch his lines thinner than he could afford. Field commanders have been told to fortify positions in regions like Donetsk and Luhansk, turning those provinces into steel fortresses. And meanwhile, public messaging downplays grand narratives of heroic liberation and leans heavily on tales of defense's necessity. We must protect our people, they say, as if in the entire nation of volunteers already lined up willingly. Yeah, right. Once again, as you can see, the propaganda and the Kremlin itself at this point decided to take care of an old man and soften the reputational blow that he was inevitably about to receive from his people for turning softer, I guess. Or maybe they have not decided it, most likely they were forced to do it. Imagine having a boss who never takes the blame, forces his subordinates to make bad business decisions, and then when the investors ask what the hell's going on, the boss sits quietly, pointing fingers to his managers and executives and just literally said nothing. Will you be happy working in such a company? What if it is not one thing, but something that happens almost monthly at this point? How long will you last? And what if instead of just quitting, your only way out was through the open window in a high-rise building and just conveniently placed banana peel right next to it? As it usually happens, right? But nevertheless, the employees of Putin's Russia still somehow managed to coexist next to the worst boss ever. The propaganda machines are churning out clips of Putin talking about reasonable, nearer-term objectives, a masterclass in weasel words. Dmitry Peskov, for example, the spokesperson of Kremlin and pretty much the representation of what Kremlin thinks, he has to constantly answer the questions that are too uncomfortable for Putin. And then crazy propagandists like Vladimir Slavyev have to daily change their narratives and openly contradict themselves, even though daily these recordings of his show are on the internet, and at this point everyone can see that he is lying. He said one thing yesterday, now he's saying completely different thing. So yeah. Yet he is still forced to do it to justify the awards for the exceptional journalism that Putin personally gave him. But here is the kicker. While the mood music has softened, the long-term playlist is unchanged. Putin still eyeing what he calls the cradle of the Russian civilization, meaning that he has not given up on snagging more Ukrainian land when the mood strikes. In other words, this shift is tactical, not strategic. It is a pause, not a surrender. And eventually, the Kremlin, the propaganda, well, everyone, will have to adjust to his new point of view, radically different from several days ago. What's the reaction of the US, particularly Donald Trump, to all this? So let's talk about this now, guys, right now. Here enters Donald Trump, swaggering into the stage with what he calls an incredibly generous peace deal. Imagine you're at Carnival and the game is win back your territory. Trump is luring Putin with promises of territory recognition like, hello Crimea, what's up Luhansk and Donetsk? Kherson, Zaporozhye, well, maybe not yet. Let's see how it goes. It's like dangling a luxury car in front of a bankrupt driver. Tempting, but are you really going to trust the sleazy salesman who sold you a lemon last time? Trump and his negotiators are convinced that the Russian president is closer to the table than ever before, ready to buy it on the hope of domestic glory. There is even talk of trimming the war down to the 5 territories where Russia has the strongest foothold. Almost the exact quote. And then calling it a day. That's pretty much it. Sounds neat on paper, doesn't it, right? Well, definitely not for Ukraine. Imagine if other countries talked about slicing your country in pieces and then giving some territories to the aggressor without you even participating in these talks. Well, that's how Ukrainians feel at this very moment. But let's not ignore the elephant in the room. Senior US and European officials believe that this whole spectacle is bait and switch. Sure, Putin might smile for the cameras, sign some papers and claim a big win. Look, I brought home the goods without even losing a single tank. But once the spotlight dims, the engines start up again. Who would have thought, right? Some assessments warn that despite the handshake and the buzz about the investments, the Russian playbook still includes a clause for resuming hostilities when convenient. It is the classic friendship now, betrayal later routine, and the West has, well, seen it before. The consensus is clear. No one handing Putin a blank check, and no one is wiping the long-term objective from his to-do list. In Putin's mind, this is just a pause to catch his breath, not a peace treaty. And he definitely needs a pause not only to resume the offensive with the renewed strength at some point in the future, but also to take care of things at home, namely the failing Russian economy that not so many people talk about. But we guys, let's do it right now. Here's where economics crash the party. Russia's got an economy that resembles a car running on fumes, thanks to sanctions and smart part of the population that's eyeing the exits to more stable and promising countries. The Trump administration has been twirling sanctions like a baton, ready to unleash more restrictions if talks stall. Meanwhile, Russian businesses are jittery, investors are scared, and ordinary folks are feeling the pinch at the gas stations and the grocery stores. Then enter the carrot of possible US investments. If Putin could persuade his oligarch pals and state industries that a ceasefire means a fat wallet, he might sell this pose as a national triumph. Historic opportunities, he called them. Sounds like a drop of honey in a bucket of licorice syrup. Yet, even the sweetest incentives can taste sour when trust is in short supply. And even though the Kremlin will never officially acknowledge it, at this point it is relatively safe to assume that most of Putin's friends, inner circle members, and just other subordinates are very unhappy about what is happening and about the uncertainty of their own futures. Russian officials spin stories of economic resurgence post-pause, but the reality says otherwise. People who lined up for bread in Leningrad, which is current St. Petersburg, in the 1990s, know that promises of prosperity often evaporate faster than vodka shots at the bachelor party. And critics in the West point out that any influx of the US cash would come with the strings attached. Human rights oversight, anti-corruption measures, maybe even inquiries into war crimes. Not exactly the kind of paperwork Putin wants, probably even the worst kind. So yes, the economy could be the lever that forces his hand, but it could also snap under the weight of mutual suspicion. If he plays cards right, the Kremlin could achieve a tactical pause to get some reforms done. Or, if he miscalculates, it could turn into economic noose that chokes the bear. Because we already know that Russia fully switched to the wartime economy, and it can only survive for as long as the war rages on. And the conflict and the economy implodes on itself faster than anyone could ever imagine. The world is watching Putin and Trump play high-stakes poker game right now over Ukraine's future. Well, let's be honest, even Ukraine itself is watching as two other players gamble away its future. But does anyone actually trust the cards they are holding? Like senior Republicans like Senator Roger Wicker and Democratic Congressman Jason Crow are sounding alarms that this is all a ruse, a way for Putin to stall, regroup and pounce later. Even Trump himself has waffled, tweeting that maybe Vlad is just fooling me around, until he can strike again. On the other side, Kremlin representatives like Dmitry Peskov cautioned that settlement in the Ukrainian crisis is too complicated to be done overnight, which in Kremlin terms means we will take forever without making any meaningful moves. Take J.D. Vance next, the US Vice President who mentioned during Fox News interview that the war is not going to end anytime soon. That's almost his literal quote. Despite all the bravado about final offers and, well, historic deals. Then there is the reality on the ground. Missile strikes roaring into Kiev even as negotiators sit in polished halls debating lines on the map. It is a reminder that while diplomats talk and concessions are made, actual bullets do not care about calendar deadlines. Every shell that lands during talks is a realistic message. Don't get too comfortable, don't get too cozy. This conflict plays by its own rules. That dual track of diplomacy and bombardment is classic Kremlin craft. Lure you in with honey, then slap you with a hidden glove full of bees. And no way bees would want to share honey they so tirelessly made with some unknown human beings. Well, record guys, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel, because don't forget, on Monday there is another episode of Thank God It's Monday podcast. We have an amazing guest and I'm very excited for you guys to see this interview. You're gonna love it. If you want to support my work, there are links down below, for example, my Patreon, where you will be able to see this interview days ahead. Once again, the link is down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.